So let's start to talk about these neurotransmitters again. We know that when we use methamphetamine, it releases adrenaline, dopamine, serotonin. And I told you that methamphetamine releases huge amounts of dopamine. And for your benefit, I have included a little graph here just to show you exactly what I mean by that. Here is your baseline at 0. This is the baseline and the kind of normal level of dopamine in your system. And you'll see that food, which is the red line, sex, which is the teal dark green line, alcohol and nicotine, as well as morphine, releases similar amounts of dopamine into your system. And it's only about 2 units more than your baseline. So you know you have a really good buncha. It feels good. And it feels great. You think, oh, that was delicious. Oh, yeah, oh, no, delicious. That's dopamine that's been released into your system. The next in the release of dopamine is cocaine. And cocaine achieves about 3 units above the baseline of normal dopamine release. And then look at the pink line, everybody. The pink line is methamphetamine, and that one releases up to 10 units more of dopamine than the baseline. So a huge amount of dopamine, way more than any other substance that people commonly use. So let me just take us a little bit deeper into this now. Because to really understand this and how it works, as well as the effect that it has on the brain, we need to demonstrate this. So to demonstrate this effectively, how dopamine is released and the effect of dopamine on the brain, we're going to need to transform this room into a brain. Let's say it's Chang's brain. This room is now the brain of Chang. And to make it really Chang's brain, we need some receptors. Brains have receptors. So I need a volunteer from this table, please. Chang's brain hasn't only got 2 receptors. I'm going to need some more. A volunteer from this table. And we're going to need one more volunteer from this table. We are inside Chang's brain, and here are Chang's brain receptors stood around now. You guys are Chang's dopamine reserves. And the dopamine is here. You are the reserves, and here is your dopamine. Here's what happens. Chang does something that causes some dopamine release. Now, dopamine is released into the brain and sticks to a receptor. So Chang starts her day and she goes into the office and she thinks, oh, I've got a nice task to do today. Oh, great. Oh, I have a nice task. Oh, dopamine is released and sticks to the receptor. This makes Chang feel good because Chang's body feels that the dopamine has stuck to that receptor. Next, Chang goes for lunch and Chang has a delicious bang xiao. And therefore, Chang has more dopamine released, and Chang is feeling good. Chang has had some achievement, Chang has had some food. Next, Chang goes home and thinks to herself, well, do you know what? I would really like some methamphetamine. And we know how much dopamine is released. We know how much dopamine is released, and this is what sticks to, and that sticks to Chang's receptors, right? Well, you have 30 seconds to demonstrate this. Chang smokes methamphetamine. Loads of dopamine release that sticks to receptors. Go, 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 go. As much dopamine as possible. Dopamine, 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 come on. 10 seconds, 10 seconds. What has happened to your stores of dopamine? Empty. Cheng's stores of dopamine are empty. They're empty. Because Cheng's dopamine is already stuck to Cheng's receptors, Cheng has no more dopamine left for other activities. How in the short term, after a few hours, is that going to make Cheng feel? Sad, upset, bored, running out of energy, tired, yes, yes. Now, now look at Cheng's receptors and look at all of the dopamine on the base of Cheng's receptors there. If Cheng continues to use methamphetamine in the long term and continues to cover her receptors like this, what do you think some of the long-term effects on Cheng's mental well-being might be? With constant dopamine production and the brain being constantly flooded with dopamine, the brain then thinks, well, I have a lot of dopamine all the time. I'm not going to make any more, or I'm going to make less of that myself. So rather than what we had on the board before, brain damage, which is way, way exaggerated, a lot of the time, long-term use of methamphetamine actually results in sometimes chronic dopamine underproduction. And dopamine underproduction, well, I don't need to tell you what the results of that could be. The obvious is, of course, things like depression, sadness, anxiety. But actually, what this also could result in are things like not as good a memory as you used to have, lower levels of concentration, higher levels of stress, fatigue, tiredness, and emotional imbalance. So this is a demonstration of the dopamine release into someone's brain if they use methamphetamine, and the long-term effects as well as the short-term effects. Let's make sure we get a good photo of Cheng's receptors. And thanks, Cheng's brain. Oh, do I have more fun for you still coming up today? Yes, so that was a bit of an insight into the effects of the use of methamphetamine onto the brain. A huge amount of dopamine being released and then binding to the receptors of the brain, which makes you feel good. It makes you feel great. In the short term, it makes you feel great, but then the dopamine stores are empty and you have no more dopamine for anything else. When you have no more dopamine for something else and you feel tired and irritable and angry and upset, that has a word. Just for a moment. So, baseline. This is you on a normal day. This is your mood, and then you're here, and you use methamphetamine, and your dopamine goes up here. You're feeling great. But then you have no dopamine left. And it goes below your baseline and then slowly recovers. This is known commonly as the come down. And here is the time where I know you guys love it, but here is the time, especially this should be done here, because that helps you to recover your dopamine level more quickly. So this brings us to the end of our session. So we looked at these 2 points yesterday, and today, this morning, we looked at the effects of methamphetamine on mental health, the effects of methamphetamine on the brain, and the possible long and short-term effects, and while taking myths and stigmas into account. Give yourselves a round of applause. You passed the first part.